You know, talk is cheap.
Talk is cheap, Lone Eagle, Tyler Mitchell, a bomber and all-rounder, whatever the hell that means. We're going to cover our first air officer. I don't normally cover air officers because a lot of people don't understand the air mechanics in the game. That's fine. Bombers are fairly simple to understand. This guy is pretty complicated because he makes a hash of absolutely everything. So we're just going to dive right into it. I'm going to try and explain as best I can what I believe this officer is capable of. As you can already see, he is attached to a bomber unit as an aid for me with a balanced skill. Specifically, before I go any further, because I know some of you are going to want to know, we're taking Rising Star's electronic interference as the balanced skill to train in on the aid for Lone Eagle. Anyway guys, without any more of me waffling, let's just get into it, shall we? Furious Assault. This is where a lot of you are going to get confused. When in a Vanguard division or Marty's Watch bomber troop, bombing a target deals extra skill damage, damage coefficient of up to 2,250. However, if you put him in a Liberty troop bomber, it reduces the bombing interval. So you can have either a reduced bombing interval or damage coefficient. Now, if you've been paying attention to how things work in this game, bombers deal exceptionally high damage. Now, the Vanguard and Marty bombers are dive bombers. They attack a single target multiple times, and the Liberty bomber is a carpet bomber or a strategic bomber that soaks an entire area. If you're using a Liberty bomber, you need to have El Carterero and Rising Star. If you're not using that, you're using any other bomber, it's El Cartero and Lone Eagle because of the coefficient damage. When the coefficient damage is applied, 2,250 is exceptionally high damage coefficient to get. It's very high. Lady Liberty, when she's at max level, only gets 2,000, and she's not a free officer. She's a premium officer. I know normally I do this bit at the end, but I want to stress the importance of how broken this guy is if you stick him on a Vanguard bomber or a Marty's Watch bomber. You're going to be able to deal massive amounts of damage very easily to ground targets. You can be in Silver 1, let's say, like I regularly play in. You can be in Silver 1, you can have a 7.1 or a 7.2 bomber, nowhere near modern cap. You can have this combination, you're going to be able to take out people's artillery that are 8.1, providing they're not 8.1 capped. You're going to be dealing a hell of a lot of damage, even at skill level 1 across the board. This thing is going to be lethal. Comes down to what I believe this skill should get rated as. Now, the problem is it comes with a caveat. It depends which bomber you've got him on. If you've got him on a Liberty bomber, I'm sorry, it's a 1. There's plenty of other options for getting your bombing interval reduced, and you don't need him. You just don't. Unless you're specifically going for an interval reduction for the carpet bomb, which I wouldn't recommend. I always recommend with a bomber, as it being a solely damaging unit, that you would go for the damage coefficiency. So he gets a 1 if he's on a Lib. However, if he is on a Vanguard bomber, he gets a 4, and if he's on a Marty Watch bomber, he gets a 5 because of the additional damage that the Marty bomber does to ground targets. I believe it has the highest amount of firepower. We'll just double check that quickly. Modern units, Marty bomber deals more damage to tanks and than bombers from other camps. You put him on a Marty bomber, it's a 5. So what we're going to do is we're going to go forwards with the grading, assuming it's a 5 because you've put him on a Marty bomber, because that's the best possible outcome for this guy. which is why I've had to explain a few things that I would normally leave until the end. So this is a bit of a backwards episode. This is why I don't like dealing with air. Increases the officer's... his second ability, Eagle Eyes, increases the damage of the officer's troop by up to 20%. We can just quickly check to see if that's any good. 15, better than dive bombing. Firepower is not relevant. Intercept not relevant. Firepower damage buff 15. Damage buff 20. So he's on par with Blade.
You know, talk is cheap.
I don't want to say this is a ceiling of 20. I think at some point they will probably push this higher. So I'm going to preempt that. I think it's nice. We get a damage increase as well of 20%. It's going to be a 4. It's very, very high. I don't know what I would need to push this over into the 5 category. It's one of the highest available, but it's still only going to be a 4 because air units get tinkered with pretty heavily. His third ability, Steel Resilience, reduces the intercept damage taken by this officer's troop by up to 50%. Now, if you know how the intercept mechanic works in the game, you would realise that a damage reduction of 50% from the intercept mechanic is exceptionally high. That is really high. Like, taking away half of someone's initial strike damage when they come into combat. That's a 5. And, more importantly, this skill, so if you are using a Liberty Bomber and you're not using him, this skill can be trained in on a fighter, because it is not bomber specific. Keep that in mind. That's got to be a 5. His fourth skill, Predator's Vigor, increases the stability of the officer's bomber troop by up to 20% and the firepower by up to 30%. This is a very good special skill for boosting out your bomber. If you did need a little bit of an edge on a bomber that was lacking in special skills, you can use this one. It does 2 things, both of them pretty well, very high. It's a 4 because I don't think that realistically, given the option you have prior to it, which is Steel Resilience, I don't think you actually need this skill as a trained skill. And if you are using a lib bomber, you're using him, so you are in turn using this skill. So over other options you have available to you to train skills, I would say this is probably it's not something you would want to train, but it's something you need if you're running him on a bomber. So yeah, does that make sense? I don't know. I wouldn't train this skill because of the skill before it. If the skill before it didn't exist, this would be a trainable skill. Let me put it that way. So we're going to move on lastly to Winged Devastation. So this is a upgrade of the tactical skill, and when in a Vanguard or Marty bomber, it deals 2,250 damage coefficient, but it deals an additional 850 damage coefficient if there's no allied troop within 1 map grid. That is exceptionally easy to pull off. If your fighters are nearby, you can just move the fighter 1 map grid away, if they're already not. So this just gives you 3,100 damage coefficient on a ground target if you follow the rule. You can wipe out tanks. We've ran a test. We ran an 8.1 test, and an 8.1 Vanguard bomber versus an 8.1 Vanguard MBT, both capped, it will bring that down to about 90%. And that Vanguard tank is geared for damage resistance and field fighting. So you can damage lead units. You don't even have to specifically target artillery anymore. With this guy on your bomber, awakened, because we tested this awakened, you can deal a hell of a lot of damage. That is straight up a massive upgrade. It is a 5. That gives him a 4.6 as a score, providing he is on a dive bomber. If he's on a lib, I would give this a skill. I'd give this a 2. If he's on a lib, I would give this a 2. Which means if he was on a lib, he scores a 3.2. So he's still a good officer. You know, he's in that middle band again. He's okay. You need him on a Marty bomber, a Vanguard bomber at the very least. How else would I use this guy? Well, he needs to be paired with the best, one of the best bombing officers out there, because of the stun and the damage coefficient you can do to ground targets.
You know, talk is cheap.
Do I think you guys should all of a sudden flip to Air Force units and then make this guy a reality? No, no. And actually, I'm going to do something a little bit extra. We're going to do a little bit extra today. So we're going to search for Raven at level 35. I'm in an L3 at the moment. The L4 is about to kick off. Now, my bomber used to be a 7.1. It's now a 6.0. And this is a skill level 2. Everything else is skill level 1. And everything on him is a skill level 1. So, out of the 8 available skills, only one of them has been upgraded. So we're going to see what this can do to a level 35. And I think it'll be pretty decent. We've obviously got this bomber up to level 200 with all the parts. And as you can see already, a 6.0 against a level 35 Raven. That's going to be... So that's a 6.52 million power unit. I've seen artillery in L4s that are modern with less than that. So you can certainly deal damage to enemy units even with a 6.0. I mean, it's going to get shot out the sky immediately, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's going to be, you know, invincible. It's not. But what you have here is a option. You have an opportunity to do something a little bit extra with your loadout. So there you have it, guys. A very rare insight, a very rare test during one of these videos. There isn't a great deal that can be said outside what I said at the start of the video. For a bomber officer, he's exceptionally good. He's exceptionally good. I wouldn't be rushing out to stick him on a lib bomber. If you have a lib bomber, guys, take my advice. You want Sebastian, and you want Aya. Ilia? Rising Star. You want Rising Star and Cartero. These are the two that you want if you're running a lib bomber. It's a subtle difference. The coefficient damage is going to be higher because by virtue that you're going to get 2 officers dealing coefficient damage. The Lib Bomber deals a hell of a lot of damage, a massive amount of damage. Mathematically speaking,
Back in the day, I trained only the best.
40% damage reduction is actually worse than 2,250 damage coefficient. Well, I mean, if you want to go down that road as well, 40% is actually worse than 1,000 damage coefficient. And also here, look, we have bombing interval reduction. So, as I was saying, there are other ways to get your bombing interval down. You don't necessarily need him for that. So, thanks for hanging on to a bit of a topsy-turvy episode. We've already, in Salt, we've already equipped one of our bombers with today's suggested setup. Not mine, I mean we've got a 8.1 available to us for striking out at ground targets during the next L4. I'll try to make some videos as I go along during the L4. It depends. If obviously the L4 is too quiet, you're not going to get a lot, and if the L4 is too busy, you're not going to get a lot. I think that's all I've got to say on this one, I'm afraid, guys. Lone Eagle, get on it.